Hello everyone, I'm Blue Carswell and welcome back to the channel. As you can probably see by this thing sat here, today's video is going to focus on the Mark III Skoda Fabia. We're going to see if this Super Mini offers the perfect blend of practicality, charm and yet a very cheap asking price. As you can probably tell already, this video is in a slightly different format. I'm normally stood somewhere along here doing this, but I'm just experimenting with something new. So with that being said, let's get on with it. So to start us off then, I'm just going to give you a brief history lesson about the Skoda Fabia. So the first generation arrived on the scene in 1999 and it didn't take long for the world to become aware of just how good it was, as it won What Car's Car of the Year in 2000. And to be fair, as a quick aside, it was this first generation Skoda Fabia along with the Skoda Octavia, which arrived in 1998, that helped cement Skoda's sort of reputation in the UK as anything other than a joke manufacturer. Then 7 years later, I believe, the Mark II, no prizes for guessing, the Mark II arrived on the scene, and that was also highly acclaimed by journalists and owners at the time. Then another 7 years later, we were greeted with this, the third generation car, and this one also won the What Car of the Year in 2015, which I'm sure you'll be glad to know if you're looking at buying one of these. Now that's all very well and good, but what about the car that we have in front of the camera today? Well, this is a base S model which can easily be identified by its lack of alloy wheels. Above the S, which can now be picked up from around £5,000, in 2015 you could have your Fabia in either SE, SEL or Monte Carlo specification. So along with the lack of alloy wheels, there are also a few other little bits that give this away to be a bit of a base spec car, namely the lack of any shiny trim here and the lack of fog lights. To be honest, I don't really mind this back to basics approach that this Fabia seems to adopt. I quite like the fact it's honest about what it is and that it's not pretending to be an S-line Audi, it's just honest about being a cheap and affordable Super Mini. And I think there's definitely something to be said about a car that isn't pretending it's a posh, luxurious thing when it's just a hatchback. To be honest, out of the triad of the Fabia, the Ibiza and the Polo, I do prefer the looks of the Fabia. I think it's kind of the more mature and more grown-up looking car, and it seems to be quite well proportioned. Now, I do have to apologise as this video format is freaking me out slightly as I'm trying to film it, and it isn't working quite as well as I'd sort of planned in my head, but nevertheless we'll get on with it. So as I've just come around this side, there is one feature I did want to point out on the Fabia, if I can hold my camera correctly, and that is that in here we have an ice scraper, a nice Skoda branded ice scraper, if I can take it out. Yes, so that's quite a handy feature to have. Talking of handy features, as we get to the boot, there is also quite a useful amount of space back here, 330 litres I think. Yes, it's quite a good size back there. This does drop down fairly quite a lot though, and when those seats are down there is a bit of a ridge to get them over. Nevertheless, useful space back here. Something else I should point out as we come around here is the base spec S does without parking sensors, but on a car of this size that doesn't really matter. So whilst I've been sort of filming the car, I've been pointed out how useful the parcel shelf is. So there's multiple places you can put that. So this is very kindly being demonstrated by Liz. Not demonstrated very well though. So that's sort of a mid-tier. And then what else did you say it can do? It can slot down.
Well, when the seats are up, it slides down there quite nicely.
Oh yeah, obviously it looks a bit ridiculous now. But as you can see, if the seats are up, this would be resting against the back of them. So that's quite a handy, practical sort of feature. Now just to round up this boot section of the video, I did forget to mention when filming that the space in the back of the Fabia is more than you'll find in both the Vauxhall Corsa and the Ford Fiesta. Right, this is my first time I've put a camera in this video, so hello. But hopefully, as you can see, along with there being plenty of space in the boot, there's also ample amount of space in the back of the Skoda Fabia. Now for reference, I'm 5'11", and as you can see, I've got loads of knee room and loads of headroom, which is no doubt helped by that tall roofline. In terms of features though, there isn't an awful lot going on back here. You have got ISOFIX points for child seats, but other than that, there's pretty much nothing. You've even got wind-up windows. But yeah, that's the back. Let's have a look in the front. So perhaps unsurprisingly, as well as the back being fairly spacious, there is also lots of room up front for the driver. You've got a good view out and there's plenty of visibility. There's also plenty of practicality with a big glove box, plenty of space down here and plenty of space in the doors. However, it is here in the front where some negatives of the base spec S model make themselves known. Now this screen here is only 5 inches opposed to 6.5, which you'll find on the SE. And I will admit this isn't as much of an issue in person as I thought it would be when planning for this video. This screen is quite nice to look at and it is very responsive, which is nice. You can also plug in via USB or connect via Bluetooth. However, as we move down, that's where I think the real issue is going to be for potentially quite a few people, and that is the fact that these S models don't have air conditioning as standard. And I think for a car that was made in 2015, that is a little bit tight, as I think in summer you'll be wanting that aircon. Moving across here, the S model doesn't have anything on the steering wheel. Not too much of an issue, would be nice though, and there is also a lack of cruise control. However, don't let those negatives put you off. I think considering the price you pay for this car, it's a very nice place to sit, it's comfortable, good visibility, and as I've mentioned, it is very practical. So at this point in the video, I think it's safe to say that the Fabia has passed the practicality test. But what about running costs? I reckon they're just as important to consider when it comes to a car like this. Well, you'll be glad to know that thanks to being fitted with only a 75 horsepower, 3-cylinder, 1 litre engine, they're pretty good. MPG is in the high 40s, tax for this being a pre-2017 car is only 20 quid a year, and this car sits in Group 4 out of 50 when it comes to car insurance. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, these low running costs do come at a price, namely some fairly lacklustre performance. After driving this example, I have to say that I'll be wary of going for the even slower 60 horsepower model, and that is because despite being a competent enough cruiser and adequate at slower speeds, it is hard to get away from a 15-second 0 to 62 mph time. On a positive note though, I did find the 5-speed manual gearbox pleasant to use, and the ride, thanks probably to the fairly thick sidewalls, was nicely compliant, and I found the car to be a surprisingly comfortable place to pass for miles. Right, I'm here with the owner Liz, and we're going to try and find out what life is like living with a Fabia. Now, you've not had this for an awful long time, have you? About 2 months? Yeah. So we can't really ask too much about the running costs, but we'll try and get to that at some point in the video. So straight away, am I right in thinking this is your second car after a Pixo?
It is, yeah.
And how does this compare? What made you buy a Fabia?
I was looking for something that was a little bit bigger than my Pixo. I basically live in my car. I've got a dog that I travel around with a lot and things like that, so I wanted something that I could fit a dog in the boot quite comfortably, as well as things like my boots that I wear when I'm walking in and things. So came across the Fabia and did some research on them and saw actually the boot is massive for a small car. So yeah, I had a look, had a drive round of one. I first drove the Monte Carlo edition, which was wonderful.
So you went at the top.
Yeah, wonderful, but was just a little bit out of the price range. So ended up looking and going for the S model. It's the bog standard model, but for what I need it for, it's perfect, really.
So you kind of touched on it being the base model there.
Yeah.
Is there anything you miss about this being the base model? Obviously the Monte Carlo must have been a bit more tricked out.
It was a lot quicker off the line. I find that this one is a little bit sluggish off the line, but it's not too bad. It maintains speed quite nicely on like motorways and things like that. But I also really miss aircon. Don't have aircon in this model, which is a shame. But apart from really the aircon, I don't really miss anything.
That's fair enough. So what would your favourite bit about this car be then?
The boot, definitely the boot.
The boot,
it's
okay.
what I use the most with my dog in now and everything like that. I find it perfect for what I need it for.
So we're going to get lots of shots of the boot then.
Yeah.
So we'll flip that question on its head. What's the most annoying thing about the car, if there is anything that's particularly annoying?
Apart from the aircon, not having aircon, just I've not really found anything else, to be fair.
Did your Pixo have aircon?
No, my Pixo didn't have aircon either,
okay.
but it was on my list that my next car I wanted aircon, so it was a sacrifice I had to make.
What else was on your list? What else was your criteria?
My criteria, so bigger, a bit safer, because I didn't feel safe in my Pixo.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, didn't feel safe in my Pixo. Bigger boot for the dog, and just to look quite nice. I quite like it. I think it looks quite a nice little car, to be fair.
Do you want alloy wheels?
I do, yeah, I did. I wanted alloy wheels, actually. That's a good point. I don't have alloy wheels on this one.
So basically, if you'd change anything about this car, you'd go for the SE instead of the S?
I would, yeah, basically.
Right.
If I could have afforded it, I would have gone for the SE.
How much more were they when you were looking?
They were probably about £2 grand more. So for what I could afford at the time, it's just not what. Fortunately, yeah, £2,000. You do get quite a bit of extras on the SE. You get like the parking sensors, and you get a bigger screen and things. But yeah, just can't. Maybe the next one.
Well, that's fair enough. Is there anything you wished you'd known before buying it?
Not really, to be fair. I think I did quite a bit of research on it before I bought it, so I sort of knew what I was going into.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was pretty happy when I bought it.
Straight on it, yeah. That's fair enough. Yeah. Final question then. Would you recommend one?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah. If you're looking for good sort of super mini, I feel like the price range was really good. Fuel costs so far have been quite good. And I do about a half an hour commute to work every day, so for that I find that it's perfect.
Okay, good. Well, I think that about sums it up really. I mean, I think you've kind of made the point I was going to make. If you're in the market for a cheap super mini that does the job being practical, quite charming, and also not costing a fortune, then the Mark III Fabia is a good shout. However, I'd be tempted to go for the SE over the S, like you say. Perhaps the extra kit is kind of worth the extra outlay, as I think in 2015 when this generation came out, the lack of aircon was a little bit tight. So yes, that's the end of this video. I've been Bleak, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.